Hello, and welcome to this video on the Rose Museum, where we again take another nibble out of the Big Apple. This is the story of Carnegie Hall. The story of Carnegie Hall begins in the middle of the Atlantic in the spring of 1887 on board a steamship traveling from New York to London. The newlyweds Andrew Carnegie, the rich industrialist, and Louise Whitfield, daughter of the well-to-do New York merchant. They were on their way to their groom's native Scotland for their honeymoon. Also on board was the 25-year-old Walter Damrosch, who had just finished his second season as a conductor and musical director of the Symphony Society of New York City and the Horatio Society of New York, and was traveling to New York for a summer of study with Hans and Bülow. Over the course of the voyage, the couple developed a friendship with Damrosch, inviting him to visit them in Scotland. It was there at the estate called Kilgraston that Damrosch discussed the vision for a new concert hall in New York City. Carnegie expressed interest in committing a portion of his wealth to the project, and the idea of Carnegie Hall was born. From this germ of a new idea grew the legendary concert hall, whose allure has drawn the world's greatest artists to the stage. Carnegie Hall, Andrew Carnegie proclaimed the ceremony laying the cornerstone in 1890 and is built to stand for the ages. And during the ages, it's probable that this hall will intertwine itself with the history of our country. Indeed, some of the most prominent political figures, authors, and intellectuals have also appeared at Carnegie Hall, from Woodrow Wilson to Booker T. Washington. In addition to standings at the pinnacles of the musical achievement, Carnegie Hall is an integral player in the development of American history. After he returned to the U.S. from his honeymoon, Carnegie set in motion the plan for a new concert hall, which he started formulating during his time with Damrosch in Scotland. He established the Music Hall Company of New York and acquired parcels of land along 7th Avenue and between 56th and 57th Streets. He hired chief architect William Burnett Tuthill, who was also proficient as a cellist and served on the board as a secretary of the Horatio Society. And on May 13th, 1890, Mrs. Carnegie cemented the cornerstone in place with a trowel that was later inscribed and plated in silver by Tiffany. The building of this new hall was the culmination of a crusade for a world-class venue in New York City that Damrosch inherited from his father, Leopold, the founder of both the Oratorio Society and the New York Symphony. The Oratorio Society was compelled to give its concerts in the showrooms of one of the piano companies, and the location that Carnegie chose for the hall was a short distance from Central Park, so far uptown that it was considered suburban at best. But at least Damrosch would have his concert hall and more. The plans called for a rectangular 6-story structure housing 3 performance spaces: the main hall, the recital hall, and the adjacent main hall, a 250-seat chamber music hall. Above the chamber music hall were assembly rooms, which, according to the program from the main hall's opening night, would be suitable for lectures, readings, and receptions, as well as chapter and lodge rooms for secret organizations. The edifice was designed using heavy brick and masonry with interior Gustavino vaulting. The 5-day opening festival attracted the creme de la creme of New York society. Arrayed in the boxes were the Whitneys, the Sloans, the Rockefellers, and the Fricks. The Russian composer Pyotr Tchaikovsky horse-drawn carriages lined up for a quarter-mile outside opening night and May 5th, 1891, choking the streets, while inside the main hall was jammed to capacity. After a lengthy dedication speech from Bishop Henry Codman Potter, Damrosch led the Symphony Society in playing America and Beethoven's Le Noir Overture No. 3. Tchaikovsky then came up to the podium to conduct the March de Solennel before Damrosch concluded the evening with the New York premiere of Berlioz's Te Deum. It was clear right away that Andrew Carnegie had built a concert hall that was pleasing to the ear as it was to the eye. Notwithstanding the talent on stage and the glamour in the audience, the reviews of that inaugural night concentrated on the hall. One newspaper reported, "Tonight, the most beautiful music hall in the world was consecrated to the loveliest of the arts. Possession of such a hall is in itself an incentive for culture." Another exclaimed, "It stood the test well." Next, we dive into the classic artists, and at the start of the 1894-95 season, the Board of Trustees dropped the Music Hall Foundation, founded by Andrew Carnegie moniker, and it just became Carnegie Hall. Since then, the prestige of making a Carnegie Hall appearance has unfailingly attracted the world's finest performers to its stages. Tchaikovsky's appearance on opening night set an auspicious precedent for the array of classical musicians whose early years would make Carnegie Hall an essential venue in the U.S. Even 2 weeks before the hall officially opened, pianist Leopold Godowsky put in an appearance in the newly completed recital hall below the main hall. And in November 1891, pianist Ignacy Jan Paderewski made his debut to extraordinary acclaim. Celebrated composer and pianist Sergei Rachmaninoff made his Carnegie Hall debut in 1909, playing his second piano concerto as guest soloist with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. A host of other great pianists have made Carnegie Hall history, and Arthur Rubinstein gave his Carnegie Hall um, a farewell concert in 1976 after 70 years of performances. Josef Hoffman's 1898 debut had people pushing and shoving to get in, while decades later people lined up around the block. In 1965 for tickets to Vladimir Horowitz's return to performing after a 12-year break. One of the most dramatic moments in the hall's history came in 1958 when 23-year-old Van Cliburn staged his triumphant homecoming after winning the gold medal in the first international competition in Moscow. The traditional, remarkable pianist making Carnegie Hall a regular home remains much alive today. Maurizio Pollini, who made his first appearance in Carnegie Hall in 1968, was the first artist whom Carnegie Hall selected to curate a perspective series, a collective of concerts, explores the artist's musical interests, pianists, as well as Mustafa Uchida, Matthew Argerich, and Lana Lang, along with relative newcomers like Jeremy Denk, Jujie Wang, and they continue to make Carnegie Hall the place where great pianists have burnished in their own artistic legacies. In addition to pianists, the early years of Carnegie Hall saw celebrated violinists such as Fritz Kreischer and Eugene Ysaye to make their names. And in 1917, with a revolution going on in the Russian homeland, the brilliant 16-year-old Yasha Heifetz made his debut. And since then, the roster of violinists who have played at Carnegie Hall has come to include such eminent performers as Yehudi Menuhin, Isaac Stern, Itzhak Perlman, Pinchas Zuckerman, Gil Shaham, Midori, and many others. The greatest cellists of the 20th century, including Pablo Callas, Yo-Yo Ma, have also graced the stage on numerous occasions. Over the years, countless singers have appeared in recital at Carnegie Hall, including such luminaries as Enrico Caruso, Placido Domingo, Maria Callas, Paul Robes, Lily Pons, Mozarete Cabale, Luciano Pavarotti, and Beverly Sills. And when the Constitution Hall in the nation's capital was closed to her because of her race, the great Marian Anderson was already made her debut on the Carnegie Hall stage 11 years earlier. Singers remain a staple of Carnegie Hall's season. Ian Bosterich, Don Upshaw, Joyce DiNato, Renee Fleming are all former prospective artists, and both have regularly led masterclasses series designed to train a new generation of singers and continue a tradition long championed by the renowned opera singer Marilyn Horne. Next, we'll touch on the orchestras and some of their famous conductors. In 1892, the Philharmonic Society joined the Symphony Society in making its home at Carnegie Hall. The move ignited an intense rivalry that continued until 1928, when the two organizations merged under the name of the Philharmonic Symphony Society of New York, still the name by which the New York Philharmonic is officially known. The Philharmonic Society quickly contributed to its own prestige and to that of the Hall. On December 16, 1893, one of the red-letter dates in American musical history, it gave the premiere of Anton Dvorak's Symphony No. 9 from the New World in the main hall with the composer in attendance. Orchestras began to tour in the early part of the 20th century as a matter of local and national pride, and Carnegie Hall was a necessary stop to buttress a group's reputation back home. The great American orchestras have been a staple of Carnegie Hall programming since the Hall's first decade, when both the Boston and Chicago Symphony Orchestras made their first visits. Over the years, it has become a home away from home for the orchestras of the Philadelphia and Cleveland and other orchestras from Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and San Francisco making regular visits. With their rich traditions, varied programming, these ensembles from around the country have contributed a lot to American culture. They've drawn inspiration and encouragement from the Carnegie Hall audience. From its early history, Carnegie Hall has been a favorite venue for the world's finest conductors, Gustav Mahler, Arthur Nikisch, William Mengelberg, Pierre Monteau, Fritz Reiner, Charles Monod, George Cizal, and many others have all passed through its portals. Arturo Toscanini electrified Carnegie Hall audiences for 28 years at the helm of the New York Philharmonic and the then NBC Symphony, writing an unforgettable page in the Hall's history. And with son-in-law Vladimir Horowitz as soloist, he raised more than $10 million for the World War II bond effort in a single 1943 benefit performance that featured Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto in B-flat minor. America's own Leonard Bernstein made his celebrated 1943 debut conducting the New York Philharmonic at Carnegie Hall, and throughout his entire career appeared more than 400 times at the Hall, both as the Philharmonic's music director and as a guest conductor of the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. Bernstein's mentor, Sergei Kosuzvitsky, brought his Boston Symphony Orchestra to Carnegie Hall on numerous occasions, introducing the New York audiences to many new works, including Bartók's Concerto for Orchestra and dozens of scores by American composers. Herbert von Karajan took his first Carnegie Hall bow in 1955 with the group when he would head for the rest of his life the Berliner Philharmoniker. Karajan's infrequent Carnegie Hall appearances over the years were almost landmark events. Sir George Solti earned a place at Carnegie Hall's Pantheon thanks to his visits with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra in the 1970s and 80s, visits that helped secure that orchestra's preeminent reputation among American ensembles. Ricardo Muti, who has made many notable appearances at Carnegie Hall himself, raising it to prominence in the U.S. as the music director of the Philadelphia Orchestra in the early 1980s and took over the Chicago Symphony Orchestra in 2010. He has since brought the group to Carnegie Hall for stellar concert performances. Beginning in 1991, James Levine took musicians of the Metropolitan Opera out of the pit and into Carnegie Hall. Next, we'll hit jazz, folk, and pop. Early jazz was first heard at Carnegie Hall in 1912 as part of a concert of African-American music by James Reese Europe's Clef Club Orchestra, and this performance foreshadowed many stellar evenings that featured a cavalcade of jazz greats, including Fats Waller, Louis Armstrong, Count Basie, Billie Holiday, Dizzy Gillespie, Ella Fitzgerald, Charlie Parker, Oscar Peterson, Jerry Mulligan, Miles Davis, and John Coltrane. In the 1938 concert by Benny Goodman and his band, one of the most celebrated events in Carnegie Hall history, marked one of the first times people sat to listen to jazz and one of the first performances where black and white performers appeared together on stage. Duke Ellington made his Carnegie Hall debut in 1943 with the New York premiere of his tone poem Black, Brown, and Beige, and when Norman Granz toured his legendary jazz at the Philharmonic programs, Carnegie Hall was the New York base. Carnegie Hall presented its own jazz band through the 1990s and was also home to the jazz impresario George Wine's JVC Jazz Festival. In 2010 to 2011, the holder of the Richard M. Bars Debs Composer Chair was Brad Mehldau, and the first jazz artist to receive the honor. A number of folk singers have also performed at Carnegie Hall: John Niles, Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, Judy Collins, Arlo Guthrie, Bob Dylan, and Joan Baez. Popular entertainers who have performed at Carnegie Hall include Josephine Baker, Judy Garland, Nat King Cole, Frank Sinatra, Liza Minnelli, and Tony Bennett. In 1964, the Beatles made their New York concert debut and on stage at Carnegie Hall. They were followed by the Rolling Stones that same year, and thereafter the Doors, Elton John, David Bowie, Stevie Wonder, to name but a few. In the recent years, musicians such as the Cowboy Junkies, Cheyenne Jackson, Jay-Z, and the Roots have come to Carnegie Hall. In 2010 to 11, James Taylor was in residence as a prospective artist, bringing along guests such as Sting and Alison Krauss. Throughout its history, Carnegie Hall has been the site of numerous television and radio productions, among the most famous being Leonard Bernstein's Young People's concerts with the New York Philharmonic Orchestra and was televised on the NBC Symphony Concerts led by Arturo Toscanini. Horowitz on television and Julie Andrews at Carnegie Hall weekly broadcasts by the New York Philharmonic from the 1920s through 1962. The AT&T presents Carnegie Hall tonight in the 1980s, live Carnegie Hall recordings by an endless list of great artists and entertainers. And Van Cliburn's 1958 recording at Carnegie Hall was the first classical album to win a Grammy Award. And also Judy Garland's Carnegie Hall recording was the first to win 5. The name of Carnegie Hall was thereby carried to audiences around the world who came to associate the hall's name with the finest in performance. Next, we'll hit on the public forum. From its inception, Carnegie Hall has been an important showcase for American cultural development. It has succeeded in this role in part because it was drawn from every genre of performance, demonstrating a variety that is distinctive, if not unexpected. The hall's openness to many sides of music and to much else besides is a unique quality and one of its strengths. At the laying of the hall's cornerstone in 1890, Andrew Carnegie proclaimed all causes may here find a place, and they did. From the early years of its history, Carnegie Hall gave a prominent public forum to anyone with a cause. Jack London spoke on communism in 1906. Emily Pankhurst lobbied for women's suffrage, and Margaret Sanger for birth control. A young Winston Churchill spoke on the Boer War, and Mark Twain and Booker T. Washington shared the stage at a Lincoln Memorial meeting. Clarence Darrow debated prohibitionists' views and Wayne B. Wheeler on the merits of banning alcohol and found their word on. In the recent years, Carnegie Hall audiences have heard journalist Walt Mossberg discuss the future of consumer electronics and next we move to uncertainty and a new beginning. In 1955 to 1960, and 6 years after Andrew Carnegie's death, New York City realtor Robert E. Simon bought Carnegie Hall. At the time of the purchase, Simon promised Mrs. Carnegie that he would not demolish the building for a period of 5 years. Following Simon's death, though, in 1935, his son Robert E. Simon Jr. took over the management of the hall and for a while actually made a profit on its operation. In the mid-1950s, with the announcement of construction of what would become Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts, Carnegie Hall's future was in doubt. The practically minded Simon offered the New York Philharmonic an option to buy Carnegie Hall for $4 million. Since the orchestra, which rented it more than 100 nights a year, was the major tenant, but plans were already made for the Philharmonic to move to the new home at Lincoln Center, and the orchestra declined the offer. While Simon wanted to be a benefactor to the hall and keep it running, he was forced to put it up for sale in 1956, always under the condition that if a way could be found to save it, the contract would be null and void. That year, a deal was struck for the sale of the hall to a group of developers who planned to demolish it and erect a 44-story office tower on its site. The deal fell through, though, but not before September 9th, 1957. The issue of Life magazine has shown the artist's rendering of the fire engine bread brick skyscraper, and developers were contemplating. By the decade's end, with the Philharmonic's departure imminent, Simon had run out of options and could no longer afford to keep Carnegie Hall in operation. In 1960, it was due to be demolished. Various committees had been formed to try to save the hall, but none of these groups had the political clout to make much of a difference. On May 16, 1960, as a result of a special state legislation, New York City purchased Carnegie Hall for $5 million, and a new nonprofit organization, the Carnegie Hall Corporation, was chartered, and Stern elected its president. Not only had Carnegie Hall been saved, it had been reborn as a public trust. Its corporation would manage and rent the concert hall and had previous owners, but it would soon present its own events as well. Carnegie Hall had entered a new phase in its history, free to serve its owners, the people of New York City, and in new, unique ways. The hall that founder Andrew Carnegie had hailed as an idea which will affect the world was poised to take an active role in shaping the destiny that he had predicted. Carnegie Hall had two distinct kinds of boards in its history. The first was Andrew Carnegie's hand-picked advisory board, and another was the real philanthropy began at the moment of the hall's reorganization in 1960, when the Carnegie Hall Corporation was formed and a board of directors pledged to ensure the hall's financial and physical health. Next, we'll hit when the hall is restored in 1986. The exterior of the hall had undergone many changes since the 1891 opening, and Andrew Carnegie added 2 studio towers adjoining and above the performance venues. And in 1908, the first of several marquees was added to the front entrance to shelter arriving concertgoers, and a few years later, the city building codes dictated the addition of a fire escape across the 7th Avenue facade. Further exterior changes to Carnegie Hall came during the 1920s when the massive front stairs were removed and the hall's management decided to carve 6 storefronts out of the ground floor masonry around the building, compromising some of the gracefulness of the original design. Until these fronts were removed in 1986, they housed 4 restaurants, a barbershop, a drugstore, a violin maker, a dry cleaner, a nightclub, a thrift shop, newsstand, and bookstore. While the exterior of Carnegie Hall underwent various changes as the decades passed, the structure itself continued to age. For many years, only patchwork repair and renovation was possible. In 1985, Carnegie Hall celebrated its 25th anniversary of its saving by announcing a $50 million capital campaign committed to the restoration and renovation of the building. Presiding over this initiative was a 50-member steering committee co-chaired by Jim Wolfenson. In 1986, Carnegie Hall closed its doors for the Keystone phase of the master plan, during which the 7th-month shutdown period, the lobby was rebuilt at the street level. The main hall interior received new seats, carpeting, floor, and stage floor. The entire backstage area was renovated and reconfigured, and the building was redone. In January 1987, this space was reopened as the Wheel Recital Hall in honor of Joan and Sanford Wheel. Still to come in the next 5 years would be acquisition of the extension space in the Carnegie Hall Tower to be built next door, which would provide additional backstage and public areas. The hall had been returned to service in pristine condition, and there was a gala grand reopening in 1986. Next, we'll hit the centennial. The 1991 marked the year of the centennial. The arrival of Judith Aaron as general manager and artistic director in early 1986 coincided with the renovation of the main hall and a succession of major milestones in Carnegie Hall's recent history. Miss Aaron unfortunately passed away on December 18th, 1998, but in the near 13 years of her leadership, the hall witnessed an extraordinary strides in programming and renewed commitment to excellence in every aspect of its operation. Philanthropic funds and the Carnegie Hall family of committed supporters have grown directly in response to this excellence. That a new plateau had been reached was evident to all by the end of the 1990 to 1991 season, when Carnegie Hall marked its centennial with a season-long international celebration encompassing more than 150 events and featuring an unprecedented roster of the world's great artists in the main hall and Wheel Recital Hall. Special centennial activities included an inaugural series of artist training workshops, including a chorale workshop under the direction of Robert Shaw, a contemporary music conductors workshop led by Pierre Boulez, and a workshop on the presentation of educational concerts, a festival of folk music in the Americas in the Wheel Recital Hall, special commemorative exhibits in the museums and galleries in New York City, and in major national and international concert halls, and the opening of the Rose Museum, named after philanthropists Susan and Elihu Rose at Carnegie Hall. These events led to a 10-day festival of concerts culminating in Centennial Day Gala on May 5th, 1991. The Centennial season also saw the completion after 10 years of the master plan for renovation and restoration of Carnegie Hall. After painstaking renewal of the century-old building itself, the plan's final phase resulted in the first actual additions to the building since 1897. Demolition crews broke through the exterior brick wall of Carnegie Hall in February of 1990 in order to connect the 100-year-old hall with its new next-door neighbor, Carnegie Hall Tower, which was a 60-story office building, and open up approximately 25,000 square feet of new space. The hall's heretofore cramped backstage and artist facilities expanded into the space, which allowed for an enlarged stage wing, more dressing rooms, a freight elevator, and a new backstage area for the Wheel Recital Hall. The public spaces of the Wheel Recital Hall were augmented with an enlarged lobby, a new elevator, and new patron lounge with bar. The capstone was the creation of a new wing of public spaces for the main hall, christened the James Wolfenson Wing, and incorporating the Rose Museum for display of exhibitions relating to Carnegie Hall's history, the Carnegie Hall Shop, the Red Maroon, and the Shorn Clubroom reception areas. Carnegie Hall goes into the 21st century after commemorating its first 100 years. Carnegie Hall commissioned works from 13 composers, including 9 Americans. This commissioning project galvanized Carnegie Hall to start permanent commissioning program, which sponsored world premieres by many artists, hundreds of jazz arrangements and new music by jazz artists, and resulted in the Carnegie Hall commissioning the program, and at a particular heartwarming New York premiere of a Carnegie Hall commission occurred in 2008. Carnegie Hall has been a place where young people can learn about music dating back to the days when Leonard Bernstein led his celebrated educational concerts in New York Philharmonic. And over the last decades, Carnegie Hall has deepened its commitment to education. So that's it. That's it. There is a wonderful set of exhibits in the Rose Museum that I visited. That's part of the Carnegie Hall, and if you get a chance, if you're in New York City, check it out. It's quite informative and dense, full of interesting and informational displays. And I hope you've enjoyed this brief history of Carnegie Hall and come to have a deeper appreciation of some of the unfolding events that led to its present state. Thank you so much for watching this video, and check out some of my other New York Nibbles Bites videos where I check out other places and museums in New York City, and you can learn more about the history of New York.